Okay. Okay, so hi, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are right now. My name is Lori Davidson, and I would like to welcome you to the final oral review for my dissertation titled Recovery and Strength Training, the Missing Piece in the Prevention of Relapse in Substance Use Disorder. Just to share a little bit about me, I am a human services practitioner with experience in counseling, teaching, administration, and program development. I am very passionate about multiple areas of the health and wellness field, including nutrition and exercise. Like many other diseases, addiction does not discriminate. It will and may have already impacted your life, a parent, sibling, or child, a son or daughter, a close friend, or perhaps you see it in your neighborhood. You can probably get a visual now. So just for a moment, I want you to think about how addiction has touched you or someone you love. And I would like to ask for a moment of silence to do this. Thank you. But today, we're not here to focus on the death world of addiction. We are here today to focus on the life world of recovery. And this is where my motivation comes from. As an adolescent, I spent several years in and out of the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. I found the sharing of war stories. This is a term that's used when members would disclose their experiences in active addiction. I found these as triggering and uninspiring. The recovery capital I found through the peer support network would slowly unravel each time a member relapsed, until I found myself alone and fearful to really get close to anyone. Ultimately, I decided to stop attending NA meetings, to focus on personal growth and to try and find another path to refrain from using. Years later, I found this path through physical fitness, specifically strength training. So in the hopes of making a significant contribution to the field of addiction treatment, as a person in long-term recovery, I feel it is my responsibility to share a possible path to recovery through strength training, because this is what worked for me. While addiction runs rampant in my family, unfortunately, recovery does not. I think the responsibility of sharing a successful path to recovery falls on those of us living it, to inspire and show those still struggling that recovery is possible. So all of this led to the formulation of my research question. What is the essence of the experience of strength training as a means of preventing relapse in addiction? This is one of the photos that was submitted by participant Sarah, and this picture represents her feeling of what happens during strength training. Before I discuss some of the research I used for my literature review, I want to make the connection between physical fitness and addiction for you. In 2008, the National Institute on Drug Abuse convened a meeting in Bethesda, Maryland, to explore how physical activity might prevent drug abuse. Fast forward to 2014, a funding opportunity announcement was released by the National Institute of Health, seeking to develop and test physical fitness activities in connection with drug abuse treatment, to address what was the growing public health crisis of addiction. So due to NIDA and NIH's efforts, preclinical and clinical studies on the impact physical fitness may have on addiction were designed and implemented. In addition to physical fitness activities, we'll call them PFA, that's how they refer to it in the literature, and addiction, the effort also sparked researchers to examine the potential neurobiological linkages. My literature review included many topics, but these topics are really at the heart of my research: addiction and the brain, vulnerability factors, and recovery capital. So I will review these topics over the next few slides. This slide is just showing a few references. Of course, the list is not exhausted, but under each topic. So some of the key references I used. And so here you'll see you'll see what the research began producing. So this image illustrates greater stimulation of the brain's pleasure circuit by drugs compared to natural rewards. So for the comparison, you have, cocaine with food, but it could be food, music, sex, whatever is stimulating pleasure. The large dopamine response increases the likelihood that the substance user will repeat the experience. Similarly, there is evidence to support that physical fitness activities affect brain plasticity, which influences cognition and mental health well-being. And similar to what we see happening here with the dopamine levels, this evidence also includes experimental and clinical studies on neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. Addiction need not be a life sentence. This image called an fMRI, functional MRI, illustrates the density of dopamine transporters in the brain during recovery stages. So this is after periods of time without relapsing, in this case from a methamphetamine disorder. Out of these advances from science, we began to define addiction as a chronic relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. Now, similar to these scans, the physical fitness activity studies previously mentioned also report that physical fitness activities generate structural and functional changes in the brain. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying physical fitness activities, not specifically strength training. Vulnerability factors. The disease of addiction involves multiple factors, along with biology and one's environment. This image illustrates other factors such as type of substance, how it is administered, the mechanics of the brain. NIDA reports that genetic factors increase vulnerability to addiction by 60%. And we know that most people in recovery will relapse at some point. In fact, 40 to 60% do, and studies also tell us that up to 70% of those relapses will happen within the first year. Recovery capital, this is one of my favorites. There are many reasons why someone with SUD may relapse, and to combat this, there are many programs that are now focusing on factors that make people more resilient, like recovery capital. Recovery capital are the internal and external resources which are needed to achieve and maintain recovery or healthy life resources. Capital can be grouped categorically, human and physical, and social and cultural. Much of recovery capital really involves connection, whereas in active addiction, we find ourselves in that death world of total disconnection. And so these are just some examples of what capital can look like for someone. As I mentioned previously, my study was phenomenologically based, and it was a qualitative study by design. The interview questions I designed are based off of phenomenological writing protocols, and the participants were interviewed over Zoom. Participants were asked to submit photos representing what strength training meant to them. This approach is called photo elicitation, and is a popular and frequently used technique in qualitative interviewing. Photo elicitation involves the use of visual imagery along with participant commentary during the interview process. During the interviews, the photos allow for the participants to communicate in a different way, addressing that feeling of knowing more than we can tell. And it provided us with a shared focus. So it was between myself and the participant. I used a snowball sampling to recruit participants. I did this by creating a flyer and sharing it through my social network. This was social media and fitness centers. I ended up with 9 individuals who self-identified as being in recovery. from a substance use disorder. I chose the age of 21 and older for the age criteria. And again, what I mean by specific or non-specific strength training routines, this could be, again, someone who is training for powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit, just any type of training to get stronger and provide resistance. So it didn't necessarily have to involve dumbbells, barbells, being in a gym. And their time in recovery had to be at least 6 months. This is some demographic information of the participants of the F.I.T recovery study. The participants, 7 females and 2 males, were all residents of the United States, with 7 residing locally and 2 who were from out of state. The ages of the participants ranged from early 30s to mid 50s. The participants' time in recovery and years strength training, I also recorded those in the data collection. Recovery time ranged from 1.5 to 31 years, and years strength training ranged from 1 to 35 years. While the participants, they had diverse education and professional experiences. The highest educational level is a master's degree. Their cultural diversity was very similar, with 7 participants identifying as white. After the interviews, I used Husserl's concepts such as bracketing and horizontalization to perform the interpretations of the transcribed interviews. And I used a similar process to interpret the photo submissions. And any additional language that emerged from those discussions were then interpreted into the essence or theme. This process revealed categories to support the essence of the experience of strength training to prevent relapses. For the 9 participants who self-identified as having substance use disorder, sorry, I had to let someone in. The essences emerged as choice, self-acceptance, focus, symbiotic paradigm, power, autonomy, and control. Choice, development of the ability to choose through strength instead of weakness. While some participants admit to using substances during their initial introduction to strength training, several emphasize that once they became more involved and dedicated to strength training, they no longer found the need to use substances. Participants emphasize the ability to place value and importance on their life world of recovery versus their former death world of addiction. Self-acceptance. Dysfunctional body image in the early years leads to positive regard and esteem. Participants shared personal stories of family dysfunction or trauma surrounding food, exercise, and body image. However, after sharing their stories and then reviewing the photo submissions, their overall impression of themselves as well as their mood improved. And several participants mentioned liking the look they achieved through strength training and the feelings of health that encompassed their achievements. Focus, clear vision of the self through body, mind, and spiritual connection. Participants explain how strength training creates deep inner connections for them and brings to life those connections that may have been severed due to substance use. Several participants explain how strength training has improved their overall mental well-being and self-awareness. The experience of strength training requires a keen focus on a somatic connection, and several participants exemplify this through their photo submissions. And so there are so many quotes and so many just fabulous quotes, amazing quotes. So in bolding out some of the language, I was really trying to just bold out what stood out for me during the interpretation process, because I know that there's a lot. And this is Brittany. She's doing her thing here at her CrossFit gym. Symbiotic paradigm, the relationship of flow and balance of the physical and spiritual life that influences the life world. Participants agree that strength training improves their quality of life and reminds them to emphasize balance, which was previously missing. The death world of addiction creates a chaos that swallows the addicted person and anyone who loves them. The relationship to self, others, and a higher power is superseded by the substance of choice. And here participants share how strength training assisted in reconnecting to relationships and balance. In some instances, the photo submission was of an experience outside of the gym, like in Dan's case. Here he describes how time spent outside of the gym in nature helps him to connect in all aspects of his recovery life world. Power, ability to discover physical and mental strength. Participants share instances of feeling strong and powerful while strength training or because of a strength training achievement. Participants explain how having the physical power to complete a movement impacts their mental health, creating mental strength. Several participants also describe how the aesthetic progressions or improvements in their physiques make them feel stronger, both physically and mentally. Just more quotes on power. And the last one on power. Here, Teresa shares her feelings of accomplishment after completing this challenging movement. I think in CrossFit, it's called toes to bar. Completing this challenging movement. Here, she's doing this and she compares this to feelings of her former self. Because substance use disorder is such a selfish disease, not surprisingly, participants shared the emotional benefits of helping others in their recovery, as well as collaborating with others who may not be in recovery. but are in their new life world. So this is autonomy, physical and psychological empowerment of self and through others. Here are some participants share being able to identify their readiness for change. They seem to attribute SUD as a catalyst for readiness in some instances, while other participants focus on the empowering feelings and emotions that they attained from strength training. And this is Teresa at her gym. She's accomplishing another very difficult movement for her. And the last essence, control, ability to operate and act with physical and mental intention. A phrase often used in the powerlifting world, what the mind can see, the body can achieve, came to me after identifying this theme during the data interpretation. Because SUD has great control over our minds and bodies, those in recovery often struggle with regaining that control and rejoice once they realize the control is returned. Below, participants share the desire to live with intention, whether to be a better person or engage in self-development. A few participants also acknowledge that they are able to be kind to themselves and have found ways to control mishaps in their lives in a healthy way. Here, Lara describes her photo submission of the essence of preparing to squat over 400 pounds. Yes, 400 pounds at a world powerlifting competition in the Czech Republic. Through this study, my goal was to understand the essence of the experience of strength training as used to prevent relapsing. But the study actually gave me more. It confirmed that all 9 participants had not relapsed since seriously adopting strength training methods into their recovery life worlds. The outcomes of this study spark a new era in the treatment of substance use disorder. I see this as certified personal strength trainers or personal trainers working in conjunction with clinicians. Traditional counseling methods in rehab centers often connect the treatment of SUD to forms of psychotherapy, either through one-on-one or group counseling. And these sessions are helpful at getting to the root causes of a client's vulnerability factors, the triggers, the trauma that initiate this disorder. So by no means am I taking anything away from that. But this process, it takes long. It can take many years. And I view this as working from the inside out. So the essence from the Fit Recovery study, so with these developed earlier, for example, while a client is within a monitored rehab center, it gives them the coping strategies they need to avoid relapsing after discharge and provides more time as well as distance from the substances. until they have a grasp on what it means to be living recovery. And I view this as working from the outside in. By combining the two, internal and external work, simultaneously treats recovery and supports the client in feeling physically better while working on an aesthetically pleasing look, which may give the client that confidence to be more emotionally vulnerable. So from this study, I created a model, the relapse prevention stages of transformation through strength training. This tool will assist recovery practitioners and clinicians as they work in outpatient or inpatient settings with clients who do use strength training as a part of their treatment plan. By connecting the stages with client attitudes, their self-reporting or general adherence to their strength training routines, predicting relapses would be possible. This model is also helpful for clients since it provides a visual for clients who may want to be more connected to their treatment process. Some limitations. The first limitation regarding the sample size, and originally I had hoped to connect with at least 12 to 15 participants, but due to COVID, I was unable to connect with certain fitness groups that I wanted to because gyms were closed and all the interviews had to be conducted over Zoom. Also, in general, I think that the majority of people in recovery, because of societal stigma, still wish to remain anonymous. Because there were only 9 participants in the study, the findings really cannot be generalized. There were also a lack of adequate diversity among the sample size, and I think perspectives from maybe a more varied educational level may have added alternative levels of meaning and reflection to the phenomenon. Also surrounding self-identification, even though the participants did share their stories and reports of being in rehab, I had no way to corroborate the evidence, the information rather. So there's the self-reporting aspect. And then finally, there's also my lived experience regarding the phenomenon. So even though I did take steps by using Husserlian concepts for the interpretation of the text, to ensure the trustworthiness of the study, I didn't incorporate another researcher, like a triangulation process. So that would have been something to do possibly in the future. Overall, in the future, I hope to partner with a recovery center or a rehab facility. I think such a partnership would allow for diverse participant interaction and perhaps a group strength training structure. I would perform a longitudinal study and hopefully have the ability to follow participants from intake to maintenance. Another layer to the study could also involve a medical team that would monitor the brain function like we saw with the fMRIs, but during strength training. And I would also love to investigate strength training's impact on other populations, such as survivors of domestic violence. My hope is that the results of this study will better inform the recovery community and create a new pathway of treatment for those who cannot find success through traditional therapies. The recovery community is large, and disseminating any theoretical or practical applications that may assist those living recovery is vital. Despite the best efforts of the recovery community, instances of substance use disorder are not decreasing. However, we are getting stronger in the fight by developing the tools we need in order to keep the people who are suffering from the disease alive until they can find the life world of recovery. For now, we can spread the message that there is hope and recovery is possible. So I thank you for joining me today. And this is just a poem by Jory Graham that kept me inspired during my time.